This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 40. Does it all have to be online? Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is October 10th, 2013. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for episode number 40 of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder that we are live on iTunes and also on Stitcher. So if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. That means you'll get new episodes automatically delivered to your listening device of choice. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. Last week, we were delighted to welcome to the podcast Joe Pulizzi of the Content Marketing Institute. He stopped by to talk about his latest book, Epic Content Marketing. We had a great interview, so if you happen to miss that episode, feel free to click on over to iTunes or to Stitcher or the RSS feed and get all caught up. So that brings me to today's topic. Today, I want to address a question that I hear all the time about content marketing. And that question is, does it all have to be online? When we talk about content marketing, those conversations tend to revolve around online media. We tend to talk a lot about blogging. We talk about content on your website, e-newsletters, webinars, ebooks, all that kind of stuff. And that prompts a lot of people to ask me, well, is content marketing strictly an online thing? Is it just an internet phenomenon? And of course, my answer to that is no, absolutely not. As we discussed on this podcast several times, content marketing has been around for years. It was around long before the internet even came on the scene. Just to cite one example, and I'm going to quote here a story from Joe Pulizzi's book, Epic Content Marketing. He talks about the John Deere company and how they really recognized that they really needed to build relationships among the farmers that they served beyond selling them equipment. They needed to help answer their questions, help them address their challenges. And so the John Deere company started a magazine called The Furrow. And believe it or not, the year that magazine was founded was 1895. So even before the turn of the 20th century, content marketing was definitely in play among corporations. And that magazine, The Furrow, is still in print today, and it is among the, it's the largest circulated magazine to farmers all over the world. So they are not only addressing farmers in the United States, but all across the world. I think their last, Joe put up a screen cap of their last issue. I think it was about farming in Kazakhstan. So it's really become a worldwide phenomenon. And this is a traditional print magazine. So today I want to talk about some of the opportunities that we have as content marketers have with offline media. And really, it's a good thing because we tend to kind of think inside a box, and if we're only thinking about that online realm, we could be missing out on some serious opportunities with some more quote-unquote traditional media. So I'm going to go through those one by one. The first content marketing opportunity offline that I want to talk about is speaking engagements. I don't know of a single business owner or business that is serious about marketing that does not pursue speaking engagements, getting out there, speaking to conferences, conducting seminars, lunch and learns, training sessions, all that kind of thing. And what that does is it, number one, presents you. We hope it doesn't prevent. It presents you as a thought leader. So you're able to get out in front of people in person and really show that you know what you're talking about. And going back to the in-person part, being in the same room with someone and having them be able to, number one, see you, number two, hear you, and number three, just kind of experience your personal presence. There really is no online equivalent for that, and that's why speaking engagements are so powerful. Speaking engagements are always also a great way to get leads. And just to give you an example, I got my biggest client after a speaking engagement I did 4 years ago. I was still working at my corporate job at the time. time, but I was presenting at a conference on content strategy, and this gentleman was the website strategist for a major healthcare system here in Houston, and he walked up to me and he said, "I really like what you have to say. We really need someone with your expertise working with us." And that kicked off a very profitable relationship that is 4 years and counting. So great way to get leads. And again, you can actually be in front of people. You can shake their hands. You can chat with them about their challenges. And that's really the optimal, right? I mean, you can talk to people online. You can chat. You can have phone calls. But really being in person with your leads is the optimal experience. So I will give you one warning, and I know I don't have to tell you this because you are content marketers and you really get this, but I have sat through a whole lot of quote-unquote speakers whose presentation was nothing more than a glorified sales pitch. I mean, it was really, the true, valuable, actionable content that I took away was very, very small, and the rest of it was them telling how amazing they are. And since I am talking to content marketers, I know you get the fact that content is all about delivering what's valuable, but really, and we do need to talk about who we are and what we do because the end is to get business, but we really need to focus those speaking engagements around delivering valuable content. So, no, you didn't need to hear that, but I feel better having said it. Okay, the second offline content marketing opportunity I want to talk about is writing a printed book, not an ebook or white paper, but an actual printed book that turns into a physical paper copy of your content. And we've talked about this on the podcast before. A couple of months ago, I interviewed Shelley Roth about the power of publishing a book, either self-publishing or through a publisher, to get your content out there. And number one, it really amps up your credibility. One thing Shelley shared is that when people find out that she has written a book and can see her standing in front of a room, holding it up and saying, "Hey, here's my book," it really does take your credibility to the next level. I mean, people who kind of know what you're talking about, they look at you in a different light when they know that you published a book. Another thing a printed book does is it gives you something physical to bring with you when you go to those speaking engagements. So if you are presenting at a conference, you can bring a whole slew of books with you to sell at the event. Or if they won't let you sell them, then you can maybe give them away as door prizes. I know a couple of years ago, I went to the Texas Conference for Women here in Houston, and I attended one of the speaker sessions. She mentioned a book, and I said, "Oh, that sounds good. I think I'll run over to the little bookstore and pick it up." And sure enough, the conference had a little impromptu bookstore where you could pick up all the speakers' books. And the line at that bookstore was so long that I couldn't get in line. I would have had to miss the next session. So do not underestimate the value of bringing your book to sell at a speaking engagement or a seminar or another event. Also, a printed book offers an additional source of revenue if you decide to sell it on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble or maybe through an affiliate program. So it can actually be a revenue stream for you, and you've already written the book, you've already done the work, but it can continue to put money into your pocket. So don't forget about that. A final thing I want to say about printed books is that it has an actual physical presence. And I know, speaking from my experience, I order so many books a year. I don't even want to look at how much I spend on books, but sometimes I download an ebook and I'll download to my Kindle or the PDF, and I forget that I have it until I go to Kindle and say, oh yeah, I did download that. But a physical book is something that I can put on my end table or my nightstand or my coffee table, and every time I see it, I'm reminded, oh yeah, I really want to read that book. I think it sounds interesting. I think it'll provide good information. So again, that physical presence can be so important. And it also could be, if someone is traveling a lot, they could also always toss your book into their bag and read it on the plane or train or whatever they happen to be in. So really look at the possibility of putting together a printed book. And yes, I am working on my own, and I will send you an update on that when I have an update for you. The next opportunity I want to talk about is the print newsletter. So we talk a lot about e-newsletters. A lot of us send out weekly, monthly, maybe quarterly e-newsletters to our followers. But it's possible that a print newsletter could be a really good asset for you, especially if you are talking to an audience, maybe an audience that's always on the go, like business travelers, or maybe something if if you have a health-based business and your primary target is parents of toddlers. Well, you might want to print a newsletter and see if your local pediatrician office can put it in their waiting room, because people are always looking for something to read in the waiting room, and of course the magazines are always out of date. Also, if you're talking to audience that don't use the web very much, maybe if your audience are senior citizens. Now, a lot of senior citizens are very web savvy, but not all of them are, and they might appreciate that print newsletter. And also, as with a book, a print newsletter is a tangible item that can sit around and remind people that they have it. And an example of that is when I go to church every week, I pick up my church bulletin. And instead of reading it while I'm there, I'll usually just tuck it in my purse and I'll keep it on my kitchen counter. And it'll just kind of stay there. And when I'm waiting for something to microwave or something to boil on the stove, I'll just kind of lean on the counter and go through my church bulletin. So there are all kinds of opportunities for people to engage with a print newsletter. Now, one thing you need to know is that there is a price tag involved. Of course, you've got printing costs, you've got mailing costs. If you get into large quantities, you'd have to store them somewhere. So if you are thinking about a print newsletter, make sure that you have the budget, not only to kick one off, but to keep it going month after month or quarter after quarter, however long you want to do it. Because I would hate to hear about you starting a print newsletter and then having the budget kind of go to the wayside and having to abandon that, because as we all know, consistency in content marketing is absolutely key. Another offline content marketing opportunity is articles in newspapers and magazines. So these would be other people's publications. So it might be your local newspaper or your local business journal. You can pitch to editors of these publications, and they always run into certain months or certain weeks where they are hard up for content. And you can pitch to them, say, hey, I would love to write an article about how to make a good impression on social media, or I would love to write an article about whatever it is your area of expertise is, and ask if they would give you a guest spot. Now, some magazines do this on a regular basis, and they have sponsored articles. So it's considered to be kind of an ad, so you would have to pay for that space. But if it gets you in front of your right audience, then it might be worth the investment. So it all depends on the publication. And that can also give you great credibility, especially if you wind up in a publication that carries some prestige in your industry. I mean, probably the pinnacle here in the U.S. would be the New York Times. Who would not want to have an article in the New York Times? Well, I don't know if you get into the New York Times, but maybe a local publication, your local newspaper might allow you to write a piece for the op-ed page. There are lots of opportunities out there. And the best part about this is that somebody else handles the rest of the publishing, right? So once you get your article submitted and make any edits that they require, your work is done. And that article can just go and be published on somebody else's nickel, and it can just be working for you to get in front of your target audience. Another method I want to talk about is CDs and DVDs. Now, you don't hear much about these lately because they're kind of fallen to the wayside with the whole cloud movement. Why would I spend money to print and produce a CD or a DVD when I can just put it all online and people can download it or hear or watch it on a streaming basis? But really, if you've done a podcast series or maybe an online video series, you really might want to consider bundling those up and burning them onto CDs and DVDs. For one thing, it gives you a physical item, and we've talked a little bit about the importance of having something physical that can sit on a desk. I might download, I do not want to think about how many things I download, the ebooks and the white papers, but if there's a CD sitting on my desk, that's a reminder that I have this and that I took an interest in it at some point and thought it would be valuable, so I really might want to give it a listen. And it gives you something to give out at speaking engagements, at trade shows, even if you're going to a networking event, tuck a few into your pocket and say, hey, I want to have a gift for you. Here's a CD program or an audio program or a video program that I came up with. And there is something psychological about getting a tangible object rather than, you could always put that content on your website for download and say, I want to give you this free gift. Here's where you can go to download it. But there is something psychological about getting an actual tangible object. And again, great for trade shows and speaking engagements. So if you see an opportunity there, really consider putting some content out there on CDs and DVDs. And again, some cost would be involved because you will want to print, or you would want to burn more than just a few. You would want to find someone who can produce those in large quantities. But that can be done pretty reasonably and pretty affordably. And then the last thing I want to talk about, I think this is the last thing. Yes, it is. The final thing I want to talk about is things like checklists, infographics, and printed guides. So these would be little things that you print out and give to people that are kind of either learning aids or reminders or references. And just to give you an example, when my husband and I bought our house a couple of years ago, the realtor, we were getting our huge packet of paperwork to do with the mortgage and everything, and the realtor gave us this really neat laminated checklist. And it's laminated so that you could put it up with thumbtacks in your garage or someplace where you be able to see it on a regular basis. And it's a checklist for all the regular maintenance items for your house. So, every month you're going to want to check your air filters. Every spring you're going to want to have your AC serviced, things you need to do on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. So it's really helpful. And of course, it has the realtor's information on it. So every time I check that checklist, I will see the realtor's name in it. It helps keep him front of mind so that if someone asks me to refer a realtor, I can just go there and I know who it is and I know who to refer them to. Another example, something really, really cool and so simple. I don't know why more businesses aren't doing simple things like this. This is an example from Jay Baer's book, Utility. And he talks about a taxi driver in Banff, Alberta, Canada, and he's known as Taxi Mike. So a guy named Mike who drives a taxi. And what he does is every quarter he prints what he calls Taxi Mike's Dining Guide, Where to Eat in Banff. And it is a simple flyer printed on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and he folds it in 3 like a trifold so it fits easily into your pocket or your purse. And he puts these dining guides all over the place, at every hotel, at every bar, at every restaurant, at gyms, anywhere a tourist might hang out, so that they can have this and they know, oh, okay, here's where to go for Indian cuisine, or here's a good spot for late night drinks. And of course, the beauty of it is if you take Taxi Mike's advice and have a night on the town where you visit 5 or 6 of his recommended hangouts, you just might need a cab ride back to your hotel. Well, who are you going to call? You're going to pull that little guide out of your pocket and say, oh, I will call Taxi Mike and he can take me back safely. So, and I love the creativity behind that, and I love the simplicity. I mean, it is an 8.5 by 11 photocopied piece of yellow paper, and I don't want to. I can't imagine how much business that brings to Taxi Mike every single year. In fact, according to Jay Baer, Taxi Mike has become kind of a celebrity. So he's been interviewed on the local news, and he's been asked to show up at events as a celebrity guest. So it's kind of made him made a name for himself locally. So there are all kinds of creative opportunities out there, not only with print, but with other offline media. So, think about what kind of materials you could provide to help your audience, separate from what you're doing online. I know you're doing all the right stuff online, but really think about those offline opportunities and look for where you can do something that not everybody else is doing. You can do something unique, something that people will remember, and something that they will appreciate. So that's pretty much it for my rundown of some of the top offline opportunities for content marketing. There are many, many more out there. So what I encourage you to do is the next time you look at your content marketing strategy, make sure that you step away from the web for a little bit and just think about, okay, is there anything we could be doing in print? Is there anything we could be doing with CDs or DVDs? Is there anything we could be doing with in-person events? And that could really enhance and improve your presence and help you get in front of your target audience more often and maybe in unique and interesting ways. So think about that the next time you sit down and look at your program. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I have another mini grammar lesson for you. So you might recall a few weeks ago we talked about the different versions of there, and there that I am constantly seeing getting mixed up. And today I want to talk about another set of homonyms that I see mixed up all the time, and that is peak, peak, and peak. Of course, it sounds like I just said the same word 3 times, but these are homonyms. And if you recall from your 8th grade English class, homonyms are words that sound alike but are spelled differently and have different meanings. So there are actually 3 ways to spell the word peak, and each spelling has its own definition. And again, this is something I see mixed up all the time, so I'm going to try and help you sort that out to make sure you use the word correctly. The first spelling of the word peak is P-E-E-K. And that can be a verb or a noun, and that refers to a quick look or a glance. So you might say, click here for a sneak peek at our next issue, or to use it in verb form, you might say, let's peek into the future of this industry. So peek all has to do with looking, whether you use it as a noun or a verb. It's a quick look, it's a quick glance, or as a verb to look at quickly or to glance at quickly. So that's peek number 1. Peak number 2, the second spelling of peak is P-E-A-K. So the first one was P-E-E-K. This one is P-E-A-K. And that can also be a noun or a verb. As a noun, it refers to the top or the summit or the high point. And that could mean, that can be literally or figuratively. So you might say, this person is climbing to the peak of Mount Everest. Or if you use it figuratively, you could say something like a certain pop star is at the peak of his career. And as a verb, you can use it to refer to attaining the top. So you might say a certain other pop star, his rise to fame peaked in 2010, and that would be peaked spelled P-E-A-K-E-D. So that's spelling number 2 of the word peak. Now, here is the kicker. There's a third spelling and this is one of the top mistakes that I see all over. The third spelling is, get this, P-I-Q-U-E. Now, peak with this spelling means to excite, arouse, or provoke. So if you talk about something really piqued my interest or that really piques my curiosity, you're going to spell it P-I-Q-U-E. And I see that all the time. I see people using that second spelling of peak, but that's actually incorrect. If you're going to talk about piquing interest or piquing curiosity, you need to use the spelling P-I-Q-U-E. So those are the 3 separate spellings and the 3 very different definitions of the word peak. And guys, I know this sounds really, really picky. I feel like, your 8th grade grammar teacher, I promise you there's not a ruler in my hand. But just remember, when you use the wrong spelling of a word, it's just as bad as a typo. And it can really hurt your credibility because people in your audience, there are people who do know the difference and people who will see that mistake, and it could really kind of damage your rep, damage your credibility. So just keep that in mind as you write and proofread your content. Okay, campers, that is it for me this week. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. I've certainly enjoyed bringing it to you. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or on Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our blog at resonancecontent.com/blog, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. And if you'd like to email me a question to cover in our Tip of the Week section, that would be fantastic. You can contact me anytime at rachel@resonancecontent.com. And if you'd like for me to come speak about content marketing to your business or your organization, you can find information about my most current talk at contentmarketingspeaker.net. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's quote is from Mary Kay Ash, the founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics and one of the great female business people of history. She says, "Everyone has an invisible sign hanging from their neck saying, 'Make me feel important.' Never forget this message when working with people." And I would add, never forget that when you're talking to your audience. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing, and we will see you again next week. Take care.